Hello again, Silly Talks aficionados. How is everyone going? Are you enjoying the chats in this season of the show? I certainly hope so. My name is Saba and I'm the curious voice behind the Silly McWiggles brand. Thanks for tuning in to this Silly Encore episode, the second part of my interview with Morwenna Collett. Last time we spoke about the representation of disabled artists in Australia, the arts and music sector's readiness to safely welcome disabled creators, and a few organizations, projects and initiatives in that space. Today it's time to talk about Morwenna's story. My guest is an accomplished facilitator in the field of diversity, inclusion and access in the arts sector in Australia. Morwenna educates politicians, cultural leaders, her peers and common people like you and me on those topics, offering practical, useful advice on how to improve those sectors. Her experience doesn't come purely from studying the books, so to speak, but from lived experience as a musician with a disability. That's why she also analyzes if and where there are still any gaps, and how to close them. So let's hear it from Morwenna herself about her journey to becoming the advocate of equal opportunities to access and participation in the arts sector in Australia.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Saba. It's great to be here. My name is Morwenna Collett, and I'm an arts consultant specialising in diversity, access and inclusion. Now, that is a kind of title, I guess, that not many people have, and I kind of made it up, really, and have certainly found my way to this in a pretty indirect way, really. I started off my career in the arts studying music at university, and I was and still am a flute player, so I'm on the classical side of the music industry. And it was actually in my first year of university that I had some health things going on and a bunch of stuff kind of happened, and that led me down the path of discovering and becoming disabled and sort of understanding what that meant for me at that particular time. I'm someone that lives with MS, which is one of those illnesses that really fluctuates. It goes up and down and is quite unpredictable. And this was sort of 20 years ago or so, and I noticed that, as soon as that happened to me, it was kind of like, oh, well, are you actually going to be able to do this thing that you want to do, which is play flute professionally in an orchestra? I was having some issues with fine motor control in my hands at the time, and a whole bunch of other things that just sort of made me think, oh, gosh, I don't know if the music industry is kind of ready for someone who might need to approach things a little bit differently. And so that really set me off down the track of moving away from performance, which was my first love, into arts administration. And like many music students do, I taught music for a while, and then I found my way more into the arts management side of things, and had a long career actually working in government, in arts funding agencies, so working on grants for artists at both the state level in Queensland and then at the Australia Council for the Arts, which is our national funding body here. And it was really at the Australia Council where I first had this opportunity to bring my own personal lived experience of disability together with my professional experience. They were looking for someone to put together a disability plan at the Australia Council, and I thought, oh, I know a bit about that. I'll put my hand up and kind of dive in. And from there, just kind of uncovered all of the amazing artists with disability living in Australia and the incredible talent here, and got really interested in that area. And so probably over the last decade or so, it's been an area that I've really kind of gravitated towards. And I've had a couple of stints of running arts and disability organisations. We've got a peak body here called Accessible Arts, which is an organisation that helps arts organisations kind of be better when it comes to access and inclusion, and it also works with artists. And 4 years ago, I had a kid. I went off on this amazing kind of research project around the world, which I know we'll talk about later. And I came back and went, I don't want to do this employment thing anymore. And I think there's really something in organisations needing a critical friend to kind of come in and help them figure out this diversity, access and inclusion stuff. And so I've been doing that for the last 3 years, and I absolutely love it. It's freelance, and it means I get to work with a whole variety of different organisations. I work across all different art forms now, and it's great because I get to come in and do the kind of thing that I'm really passionate about and I love, and help other arts organisations on their journey to being able to do that better, and just provide more access for everyone here in Australia. So that's a little bit about me and how on earth I got here.
Okay, that's great to hear. And funny that you would say that you played the flute, because I did not study music, but when I was a kid in our grammar school system, there was a subject called music, and you needed to play the flute. So, the wooden one. And then, and then I was really into it at some point, and I joined like a medieval band, let's say, and I played the alto. And I really regret not doing that anymore. I mean, I learned how to read the notes and, like kind of be musical. We went to competitions as well, but it ended when I left the grammar school. So it's just a shame. And I never picked up any other instrument. So yeah.
And it's such a popular one, and that's such a common story, isn't it? So.
Oops, I accidentally gave away my secret episode of being a classical musician wannabe in primary school. But let's not get distracted and focus on Morwenna's work instead. A few years ago, she conducted extensive research investigating inclusive music programs, venues and festivals that actively engage disabled people in the US, UK and Ireland, and published a report based on that. With that overview and knowledge, she can compare it to where Australia is on that front and suggest the best course of action. So in this next segment, she is talking about why she took on that project at all and what her most important findings are.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to win something called a Churchill Fellowship, which we have here in Australia, and they're actually in quite a number of other different countries as well. And the idea with Churchill Fellowships is that it's about going overseas and finding out amazing new knowledge to then bring back and share with the community back in your home country. And so you had to identify some sort of gap or gap in knowledge that wasn't possible to kind of fill in Australia. And so, that was the thing for me, where the first time I really wanted to bring this idea of music and disability together and really go in deep with looking at what other amazing organisations and people are doing across the world. And I spent most of my time in the US and the UK, which are probably the two countries that are leading in this field. And I looked not just at contemporary music, but all styles of music, at venues and at festivals, and just music organisations, even like orchestras, for example, that had programs for people with disability. And I just had this incredible kind of couple of months of immersing myself inside all of these other organisations. And, the UK in particular really struck me in terms of how, I guess, for want of a better word, mainstream accessibility is now in their music industry. And part of that is because for the last 20 years, they've had a fantastic music and accessibility organisation called Attitude is Everything, which have just been doing such fantastic work. And one of the great things that they do is they've developed this, what they call the Charter of Best Practice. It's a big fancy name, but essentially it's a tiered accreditation system. So they rate music venues and festivals on their current level of accessibility. So, you do this much and you get a bronze, this much and you get a silver, this much and you get a gold. And the beautiful thing is that this charter includes lots of advice and support and guidance from Attitude is Everything. So they're there to kind of hold your hand and walk you through it if you're, at maybe a new festival who's looking at this for the first time. And I really like that approach because, it's sort of, you can't do it all at once. You've got to start somewhere. And that it's kind of like a roadmap that spells out, here's the first stuff to tackle, here's some of the quick wins and the stuff that's relatively easy to just kind of, tick it off straight away. And then here's the next layer of stuff to think about. So it's really great. And I've currently got a little bit of funding to explore. I'm doing a feasibility study to see whether we could maybe introduce something similar to that here in Australia, working with Attitude is Everything, but developing it for our Australian context. And so at the moment, I'm in the middle of having lots and lots of conversations about that idea here. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what it could do for our music industry, because I think the arts sector, for want of a better term, it gets a lot more traction talked about, as we said before, with other art forms, but having something that's specifically tailored to the needs, the quite specific needs of contemporary music, and how the contemporary music industry operates, I think would be really valuable. So yeah, the Churchill Fellowship was incredible, and for me, it was the real turning point in my career, where it was on that trip where I sort of decided that I'm going to go and do this consulting thing, because there's such a need to bring this information back to Australia and be able to go in and work with lots of different organisations. And I think since I've come back, I've worked with a lot of the music peak bodies, so Music Victoria, Music New South Wales, Q Music, and through them I've probably worked with about 70 different music venues on the east coast of Australia to help them not just with their physical access but also their online accessibility too, because that's something that we don't always think about, but access actually starts online, because you need to tell people the sort of access that you've got, and they need to be able to access information in a way that's going to work for them to find out what's on. And why would I bother to turn up to your venue? So I've sort of really prioritized looking at online access as well for organizations.
Okay. And since you've got this global kind of overview, so what were your thoughts when you got to the UK and the US? Were you like, oh no, we're so behind in Australia, or like, no, we're actually not doing so badly, So compared to these other countries that you said yourself are probably the most kind of progressive or not, a bit more advanced in that field. So how does Australia look? Good or bad?
Somewhere in the middle. What's the word? Room for improvement. There we go. That's and look, I think it's because those other countries have had a much stronger history of disability rights activism. They've had kind of people banging on the doors saying this is not right. They've had, in the UK, Arts Council England, their major funder, they've really put a huge priority on equity, diversity and inclusion, and that's had a real flow-on effect for their organisations. And I just think here we haven't quite had that same level of activism. We haven't quite had that same level of sort of real demand from our funding bodies. And so I think we're starting to see that happen now. Our disability community here is getting more vocal about, things that aren't right, and our funding bodies are starting to take more of an interest as well. So catching up, but very different approaches. The US was interesting because, it's probably not where the UK is, but it's perhaps further than Australia because, there's a big focus there on compliance and this kind of nervousness around getting sued. I don't want to do the wrong thing because I'll get sued. So it seemed to be a lot of their access work was actually driven by sort of compliance rather than necessarily always wanting to do the right thing, but just, I've got to make sure I, don't get in trouble. So different motivations, I guess, but yeah.
And I have to be honest, I skimmed through the article, the report, I want to say, because
it's very long.
Yes, it is, but there are a lot of interesting findings in it. But just, kind of, if you could maybe summarize the main points or your main findings, that would be great.
Yeah. I think The Churchill report that I wrote, there is a short version online available as well. But I kind of came up with five, what do I call them? 5 success factors for inclusive music venues and festivals. And the first one is around just getting started. So it's about kind of jumping in where you're at and doing something. And it's around this idea of there are things that are achievable to help make access improvements. Wherever you're at, there's going to be something that you can do. I think sometimes we worry about, I want to get it all perfect before I do anything, but it's around just kind of rolling up your sleeves, jumping in and just getting on with it and doing something. The second one is around doing your research, doing really good listening to what the disability community is telling you, and getting feedback. So for me, this is really sort of finding people with disability in your community to work with and to learn from, and, to engage in conversation with around what's working, what's not working. And there's so much available online. So it's really sort of, educating yourself and understanding, what's out there already and what your community needs. The third success factor is around improving culture and responsibility. And this is around this idea of everyone needs to take responsibility for accessibility. It's all about, to create an inclusive society takes all of us. And sometimes there can be a debate around, should my festival have an access officer, or should it just be part of everyone's job? And, there's no right answer to that. Sometimes having one person is great because, there's a one-stop shop and there's, someone that's going to be thinking about it at least. But sometimes that's not great because then other people might not think about it because they'll go, that's so-and-so's job. So it's around, creating an organisational culture at your venue or festival where access is just part of what you do, and it's just part of, who you are as a music organisation. The fourth factor is around doing your planning and making continuous improvement. So as I said before, I don't think there's anything, there's no such thing as 100% inclusive. And also some access stuff does take time. You kind of can't switch it all on tomorrow. So it's making a plan and kind of checking back in with that plan and kind of pushing yourself further and further each time. So I work with a lot of organisations on creating disability action plans, which are usually multi-year plans to go, okay, what's the, where are the quick wins, the things we can do straight away next year? What might take us, 3 or 4 years to kind of get, whether it's capital works money to fix our building or whatever it might be. But sort of planning is a really important part of this process. And the fifth factor was around connecting and keeping on learning. So, working with each other. I think, all of us, we just want everything to be better and to be more accessible and inclusive. We're not kind of, I don't think you'll find many people that are kind of, holding on to their access secrets. There's a real kind of generosity and wanting to share what we know so that we can all just kind of, make this more inclusive world. So I think it's kind of talking to colleagues about what they're doing, going to, training, conferences, that kind of thing. But yeah, just creating an opportunity to sort of keep that ongoing learning happening around this, because all of us, even myself, we're always learning about ways that we can do things more inclusively and more accessibly.
As you've probably noticed, a lot of Morwenna's findings are not rocket science at all. And I don't mean that in a bad way. What I do mean is that they do make sense. And once you hear them, you probably go, yeah, I can totally do that, like I did. Funnily, I think that process to achieve equal access to arts and music is very similar to the marketing sales funnel. I know it sounds a little brutal, but let me explain. Awareness of it sparks more interest in the topic and a desire to be a part of the community, right? And that finally leads to taking action and converting it into a permanent part of an organization's culture. And that's what having these conversations is really all about. Noticing and acknowledging the things that are neglected, but could easily be implemented. And in that context, I asked Morwenna to give me some tips on where I, as a creator, could improve as well. Okay, So now let's talk about me, for instance, or like the easy, for lack of a better word, fixes or solutions that I could implement, because I realized, and actually the 5 success points really, I think they apply to me as well, because, I'm aware of it, but I also know that I don't do a lot of things that I should be doing, I could be doing for different reasons. Obviously, it's not an excuse, but, it's a way to start as well, to start thinking about it. So for instance, when I publish a video on YouTube, I don't necessarily do like the captioning, which I know it could help. I probably know that I could do alt text when I put a photo up on Instagram. That would also help someone as well. So I'm just thinking, so are there some very simple solutions for, like, it's a generalization, of course, but that people don't really implement, and they're so easy that you can't believe that people don't do it out there, like, for the able people, for the disabled audiences, for instance.
Yeah, look, and good on you for being honest, Saba, because you're not alone, and there's lots of people where that's the case. And I think usually it comes down to knowledge. It's knowing what to do, and then of course it's prioritizing it in terms of time and resource as well. And one of the things about just while I'm thinking of podcasts, since we're having a podcast chat, is things like transcripts. Having a text version available of podcasts would be great for anyone who's deaf who wants to listen in, for example. And something like that can be done actually for free through some software called Otter that we have here in Australia. So you can play your podcast back through something called Otter, and that will give you a written transcript. And it's all AI technology, and it's actually pretty good now. So you might have to go and do a couple of little fixes, but nothing major. So that's one example of something that it could just be built into the process. So when you're doing your whatever happens next after this chat, whether it's editing or whatever, you build that into your process, something that you do. And I think the thing about Access is it's trying to build it into stuff that you're already doing. You don't want to kind of layer on all of these additional steps so that it feels like this kind of mountain of work coming at you. It's finding those sort of quick and easy ways to go, after I do this, then I put it through this piece of software. It takes half an hour or however long the chat is, and then it'll be done. So things like that. But I think in terms of where the quick wins lie, I think definitely looking at online accessibility is great, because that's something that usually doesn't have high levels of cost associated with it. It can, but there are sort of free captioning services out there, for example, something like alt text. Again, that's about building that into processes to make in image descriptions or alt text is kind of part of what we do. So in fact, on my website, there's a online accessibility checklist, which could be a useful place for people to kind of start if they want to dip in. So yeah, I think my biggest tip would just be kind of look at how you're doing what you're doing, and where might there be kind of opportunities to just sneak in a little access step here and there.
Yeah, and it's very useful what you said about the software that kind of does the transcripts, because I used something which is the other way around, but I dropped it, and I'll tell you why. I wanted to convert all my podcast, the text, into audio files, because you can do it on a platform where I do my podcast, Anchor. They do it. They offer this sort of service. The funny thing is, it also unfortunately, it also reads the text under the photos. And then it kind of breaks the flow. And it's funny because, it doesn't change it's very monotonous, and you can't tell whether this is part of the text or the part of the description of the photo. So I wasn't happy with the results, and I kind of dropped it, but I think it's a good idea, and maybe just needs a little more work on, if I can cut out certain probably moments and stuff. But thank you for mentioning that. I'll definitely have a look into it.
Great suggestions and recommendations, wouldn't you say? And not to brag, but I'm stoked to say that I've started gradually introducing some of them in my work, like adding captions to videos published on YouTube and transcribing some of the podcast episodes. Sure, there's more for me to do, and I'm really looking forward to doing more. But, and again, this is not an excuse, just a fact, as a one-woman orchestra, it will probably take me a while to level up. But to finish my interview with Morwenna, I steered the conversation in a bit more optimistic direction. Morwenna is a musician herself. so I was curious about whether she still plays regularly. And obviously, I also wanted to get to know her music taste.
I still play, definitely not as much as I would like to, but I still play I play in a community orchestra here in Sydney. So we have, concerts every couple of months and rehearsal once a week. So it makes me get the flute out of the box, at least, once a week. So it's still something that I really enjoy doing. But I must admit, when I think about, the pressures that are on, professional musicians trying to make a living from performing, I'm quite glad that I'm on the other side of that and not trying to not trying to grapple with that. So I do still play, but not as much as I would like.
Okay, and I'm wondering, what sort of music do you listen to privately? If you come from the classical background, let's say, is that the same sort of music you would put on home?
Oh no, it really depends. I think, like so many of us, it depends on all sorts of things. I think I actually had this great experience last year where I had a significant birthday, and I got everyone lots of my friends and family to write in with a song that they wanted to recommend for me. So I've got hours of this playlist that I'm still working my way through, which is great, from all genres and things. I don't do it as much as I would like to, but I really, like many people, like discovering new bands and grassroots things here in Sydney. Obviously, I've got a particular interest in artists with disability, and one of my favourites at the moment is Altar Boy, who are a deaf trans electro pop group from Perth, and they're really kicking some big goals with Triple J and festivals around Australia at the moment. And they're incredible because they're a band of deaf and hard of hearing musicians, and they have Auslan interpretation built into all of their live shows as well. So they're really worth checking out, and really like their music.
I think it rings the bell. I'll have to check out the name. I think it might have heard their music before. But the last question, and it's actually not a question, but maybe just a piece of advice. I know it might sound a little brutal, but I'm just wondering whether there is a database for Australia for the musicians who are disabled. And I'm just asking in the context of, I feel like something I can do as well is to amplify those voices, like to get the names out there. But because I don't know many disabled musicians that, whose music I would have heard in the past. So is there anywhere I could go and just look for some names, or would you be able to send through a few later on?
Yes, absolutely. I've got you've just reminded me, an action for myself is to I've started a Spotify playlist for a lot of the musicians with disability that I like. So I should put that on my website so that people can actually access it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I've got my own little black book of musicians that I'm aware of that identify, but I think it's one of those things that unless it's obvious, unless you know the musicians personally, or unless you're aware of their particular circumstance, you might not know. And in fact, there's probably a whole lot of other musicians we're just not aware identify. So, but I have started a playlist to try and solve this little problem.
And on that note, ladies and gents listening to this Encore episode, this is the end of my chat with Morwenna Collett. A huge thank you to my guest for a comprehensive guide on the matters of diversity, inclusion and access in the music industry. I found Morwenna's insights very interesting, especially since she has a much broader overview of this topic, including her research conducted in some other English-speaking countries. I'm keen to improve my channels according to Morwenna's suggestions as well, and I encourage you to do the same, whether you work in the arts and/or music industry or any other one. Do visit Morwenna's website for more resources and services she provides that can surely benefit your organization. In the episode notes, you'll also find other links to things we've talked about in this part of the chat. Don't forget to follow this podcast on the streaming platform where you normally listen to it. Let's connect on social media too. You can find me as @sillymcwiggles. Plus, my sillymcwiggles.blog offers more content related to the Australian music business, so check it out. Before I let you go, however, I'd like you to listen to something else. Remember that the Encore episodes finish with a preview of a song by an artist mentioned in the conversation, right? This time I'll leave you with Altar Boy, the Perth band Morwenna is a fan of. so don't go anywhere after the jingle has finished. Thanks heaps for spending the time with Morwenna and me. Till the next episode then. See ya!